I think it's safe to say that most teenagers are excited for when they get their first car. I know I was. The idea of being able to go where I wanted, when I wanted, with my parents' permission, of course, was something I had only been able to dream of before. Stuck in my rural home miles from the nearest point of interest, there wasn't really anywhere to go but the woods. I had gotten my license months prior, but wasn't allowed to drive my parents' cars after the tests. So, the day my dad gave me his old Camry after he got a new car was life-changing. For the next 2 weeks, I was my friend's chauffeur, and we'd go together to the mall and Cinnabon, a relatively nearby town, a nearby nature spot great for fires and getting high, and to and from school on a regular basis. Then, one day while I was at school sitting with my friends James and Claire, James brought up a new place we could go. "You ever heard of urban exploring?" James asked Claire. "No, is it like exploring the city or something?" she responded. James laughed and looked at me. "How about you, Alma?" "That's when you explore abandoned buildings, right?" I replied. I'd heard about it before from my older brother, who had been an urbex fiend in college. "Yep," James exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. "I heard about this place from Isaac in chemistry earlier. There's an, abandoned farmhouse in a field in the woods out near the golf course. Isaac said he's gone once, but he apparently pussied out before he could really explore it." "Fuck no," Clara said. "Oh, come on, why not?" James complained. "I've seen enough scary movies to know what happens in abandoned farm homes. No fucking way." I laughed. She had a good point. James looked at me with a look of, "Don't be a shitlord," on his face. "I'm down. What kind of junkie or murderer would want to hide in a boony shithole like Franklin anyways?" "Come on, Claire, there's nothing to be afraid of," James said to Claire. Claire sighed. "Fine, but I'm bringing a bat or something." After the final bell, James got the info from Isaac on how to get to the place. It was about a 30-minute walk into the woods from the nearby golf course. We decided we'd go around noon on that Saturday. We'd all tell our parents that we were going to be at the mall for a few hours and catch dinner and a movie after, so we'd have plenty of time to explore. James and I were excited, and Claire, less so, but I could tell part of her wanted to go. She just enjoyed being stubborn. When Saturday rolled around, I told my parents I was going out and hugged them goodbye. I got in the Camry, put on some tunes, and drove off to grab James and Claire. It was a bright, sunny day in autumn, perfect for exploring. After picking them up, we all ended up arriving at the golf course around noon. The air was stale and cool, and the sound of dry leaves scraping against each other in the wind filled the atmosphere as we made our way through the woods. There was no clear path through the forest that would lead to the abandoned farmhouse, but there were obvious markers like gnarled trees or cracked boulders that helped lead the way. Isaac had gotten a map from the older kids he had learned about the place from and had passed it on to us. As we followed its directions, I felt eager to explore my first abandoned house. I knew my brother would be proud to hear I had gone on my first urban exploration. "Are we almost there?" Claire asked. "Yeah, only a few more minutes probably. I think I can see a clearing in the distance," James replied. "Word," I said. When Claire, James, and I breached the forest wall and entered the overgrown expanse of a field with the abandoned house sitting in the center, I felt a sudden nausea. It was brief, but overwhelming. "You okay, hon?" Claire asked, noticing my distress. "Yeah, I'm fine," I panted. I just felt really sick for a second. "I'm good now." "James, are you sure about this?" Claire said sheepishly. "Seriously, Claire? Come on, we're here, we're not backing out. Do you really want to walk back through the woods by yourself?" James said. He turned towards the house and began walking through the tall waves of grass. Claire sighed in exasperation and gripped the taped-up Louisville Slugger she was carrying. "Ugh, wait up!" The three of us made our way through the field to the wraparound porch that clung to the sides of a large wooden building. Its windows were boarded up from the outside, and the front door stood ajar, slamming about in the wind. The place was in poor condition, but still stood steamingly strong. The walls were covered in thick vines, and a large tree shadowed its eastern side. Suddenly, I felt another intense surge of nausea. I gripped my stomach and moaned. James put his hand on my shoulder. "You good?" Yeah. I exhaled as the nausea faded away. "Sorry. I just keep feeling like I'm gonna puke. I want to keep going, though." I walked up to the steps of the house and climbed them as they followed. The interior of the house was dim with thin rays of light seeping through cracks in the boarded windows. Leaves crunched under our steps as we wandered around the parlor, looking at dusty old picture frames and broken furniture. The place looked like it had been abandoned in the 60s. Its old floors creaked beneath my feet as I examined a photo of an attractive young man standing with his parents. I heard James enter the hallway and slowly ascend the groaning staircase. "Hey, be careful! The stairs are old," I shouted to him. I know, I could hear him say from the stairs. Claire and I continued to look around the first floor. "This place gives me the chills," she said. "Doesn't look like anyone's lived here in nearly 30 years, I replied. "I hope not. I don't want to run into some crazy hobo," she said. "In Franklin? Why would a hobo come to Franklin? There's not even a train station nearby." "I don't know, just..." Suddenly, we heard James' heavy footsteps as he ran to the stairwell. "Alma, I need you to come up here now," James shouted with quivering panic in his voice. My heart sank and again nausea welled up from within me. What is it? Please just come here." Claire and I ran up the stairs and followed James into a dimly lit room at the end of a hallway. As soon as I entered, I too began panicking. "What?" I exclaimed. What the fuck are those? Are those pictures of me?" The walls of the room in which we stood were plastered in endless photos and Polaroids of me. They were all candid shots from various points of my life. Baby photos through my parents' windows, pictures of me swimming in my neighbor's pool when I was in kindergarten, photos of my family and I eating dinner at a restaurant in Disney World, pictures of me sleeping in my room. Whoever took these photos had been following me for years, even to places I traveled. Short phrases like "love you" and "want you" and "need you" were written on the collage of photos in lipstick. Strewn about the floor were things of mine that had gone missing over the years. Stuffed animals, baby spoons, sippy cups, training bras, socks, earrings, so forth. I was overwhelmed with a sense of dread that permeated my whole existence, haunting me to my core. That's when the door slammed shut downstairs, followed by heavy footsteps through the hallway. James, Claire, and I all began shouting over each other in our panic. The only way out was back down the stairs, but we could hear the footsteps begin to climb to the second floor. "Close the fucking door," I shouted over James and Claire's frightened clamors. Claire sprang into action and slammed the room's door shut, James running over to a heavy wooden wardrobe, which he then shoved in front of the doorway. "We have to get the boards off the window," Claire yelled as the heavy footsteps in the hallway approached the room. James and I immediately ran to the window and began kicking the rotten boards until they tumbled down the slanted roof of the porch. The room began to shake as whoever was on the other side of the door began to bang on it with intense ferocity and rage. As soon as there was an opening big enough to climb out of, I shouted, "Go, go!" and we all jumped onto the roof of the porch. As the three of us jumped from the roof onto an old rusted truck and onto the ground, we heard the wardrobe crash to the ground and the door slam open. I didn't turn back to look. We just ran. We managed to make it back to the car in what felt like half the time it took us to get there, our breaths short and our hearts racing. I unlocked the car and we all jumped in, locking the doors behind us and speeding off. "We're going to the police, right now," I said. No one argued with me. They stayed silent as we hurried to the police department. Somehow, in our haste to get out, Claire managed to rip 3 photos off the wall that were clear creep shots. These were invaluable in getting the police to believe our story. We gave them the map and 2 officers went off to investigate. We waited at the station, all of us in shock, but particularly me. It was like my life had changed in an instant. I'd had some sick fuck follow me, observing me and admiring me for years with some sick obsession and unclear end goal. Strange sounds at night I had heard in the past, weird scratching on my window, things I had put off as coincidences or typical sounds for a rural home suddenly seemed much more sinister. I was shaking in my seat as we waited for my parents to come and for the cops to find the house. The cops radioed back to the station that a large fire was spreading through the woods near where the clearing was on the map we had given them. The burning was successfully controlled, but the abandoned farmhouse was eradicated in the inferno. There was no evidence left, no leads to follow. My family believed me and had seen the photos Claire had taken from the room, so we packed up and moved closer to my mom's family a few states away not long after. I began seeing therapists for the trauma of what I had seen, but even with their help, my incessant fear remained. I was always looking over my shoulder and making sure to draw the shades in every room I was in, regardless of what floor it was on. For years, I was terrified of the man who had been watching me for 17 years. Were they still following me after I moved out of state to attend college? When I started my family? Eventually, the fear was but a faint darkness in the back of my head. But today, I received an envelope with no return address that was covered in cut-out pictures of my face with the eyes missing. The piece of paper inside had all the eyes glued on it, with the words, "Still watching," in smudged black lipstick scrawled diagonally across the page. Included was a picture of my newborn daughter sleeping in the crib I had just bought her 2 nights ago.